Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, which you'll be glad to know, right? And text number 22. And the verse is as follows. Sva-dhāmnā hi nitya-vijitātma-guṇaḥ sva-dhāmnā Kalo vashikrita vrasrijya visarga shakti Chakre vrashishtama jayeshvara shodashari niṣpīḍyamānam upakarsha vibho prapannam. Sa. That one, the Supreme Independent Person who through his external energy has created the material mind, which is the cause of all suffering in this material world. Tvaṁ. You are. He. Indeed. Nitya. Eternally. Vijita-atma. Conquered. Guṇa. Whose property of the intelligence. Sva-dhāmnā. By your personal spiritual energy. Kṛṣṇa. The time element. Which creates and annihilates. Vashikrita. Brought under your control. Visrujya. By which all effects. Visarga. And causes. Shakti. The energy. Chakre. And the wheel of time. The repetition of birth and death. Vrashishtam. Being thrown. Ajaya. By your external energy, the mode of ignorance. Ishvara. O Supreme Controller. Shodasha Are. With 16 spokes. The 5 material elements. The 10 senses. And the leader of the senses. Namely the mind. Niṣpīḍyamānam. Being crushed under that wheel. Upakarsha. Kindly take me to the shelter of your lotus feet. Vibho. O Supreme Great. Prapannam. Who am fully surrendered unto you. Translation. My dear Lord, O Supreme Great, you have created this material world of 16 constituents, but you are transcendental to their material qualities. In other words, these material qualities are under your full control, and you are never conquered by them. Therefore, the time element is your representation. My Lord, O Supreme, no one can conquer you. As for me, however, I am being crushed by the wheel of time, and therefore I surrender fully unto you. Now kindly take me under the protection of your lotus feet. Purport. The wheel of material miseries is also a creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is not under the control of the material energy. Rather, he is the controller of the material energy, whereas we, the living entities, are under its control. When we give up our constitutional position, Jivara Swarupahai Kṛṣṇa Nitya-Das, the Supreme Personality of Godhead creates this material energy and her influence over the conditioned soul. Therefore, he is the supreme, and only he can deliver the conditioned soul from the onslaught of material nature. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etang tarantite. Maya, the external energy, continuously imposes upon the conditioned souls the suffering of the threefold miseries of this material world. Therefore, in the previous verse, Prahlāda Mahārāja prayed to the Lord, "But for your lordship, no one can save me." Prahlāda Mahārāja has also explained that a child's protectors, his parents, cannot save the child from the onslaught of birth and death, nor can medicine and a physician save one from death, nor can a boat or similar means of protection save a person drowning in the water, for everything is controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, suffering humanity must surrender to Kṛṣṇa, as Kṛṣṇa himself demands in the last instruction of Bhagavad Gita 1866, Sarva-dhāmnā pratyaja, mam ekam sharanam vraja, aham tvaṁ sarva-pāpebhyo mukṣayishāmi ma shucaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. All of human society must take advantage of this offer and thus be saved by Kṛṣṇa from the danger of being crushed by the wheel of time, the wheel of past, present, and future. The word niṣpīḍyamānam, being crushed, is very significant. Every living entity in the material condition is actually being crushed again and again, and to be saved from this position, one must take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then one will be happy. The word prapanam is also very significant, for unless one fully surrenders to the Supreme Lord, one cannot be saved from being crushed. A criminal is put into prison and punished by the government, but the same government, if it likes, can release the criminal from imprisoned life. Similarly, we must know conclusively that our material condition of suffering has been allotted to us by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and if we want to be saved from this suffering, we must appeal to the same controller. Thus one can be saved from this material condition. I first offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda, to all the previous acharyas, and to all the assembled devotees. Vancha kalpatarvascha kripasanabhyevacha patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Continuing our discussion from the last time we came together to discuss Bhagavatam, I'm continuing the thought process that Kṛṣṇa starts in the Bhagavad Gita, in which he says, Vita raga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashrita bhavo jnana tapasa puta mad bhava magataha. The elements of this verse are that there are three horsemen that hold us back from our natural condition of happiness, and they're psychological. The first is raga, or an irrational attachment to that which is temporary. In the Gita, Kṛṣṇa says, Yehi samsparjaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. That's one who becomes intelligent, doesn't appreciate anything that has a beginning and an end. Or I should say, they don't endeavor to find happiness in it because they know it's a source of misery, not happiness. And actually, it's a source of, as Prahlāda Mahārāja says, as soon as one starts thinking about enjoying that which is temporary, that's when one starts suffering. You don't even have to try for it, you just have to think about it. And Kṛṣṇa, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita says, Jyayato visham pumsam sangas teshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamat kamat krodho bijayate. And that is that by contemplating happiness in this temporary world, one then starts a downward spiral which ends up in anger. And then one forgets oneself. So this krodha effect comes from this cycle that we are in of being irrationally attached to the objects of the senses here in the material world. Then bhaya is a fear of our personal existence, a fear of personhood in general, an ignorance of personhood, starting with the idea that there's no one who created the material world. It's just always been there, or it happened by chance from an explosion and it somehow came together. And then there's krodha, which has many implications, the word anger. One of them is cynicism. And that's a emotion that arises from this frustration that one has from trying to enjoy matter and then finding out that it doesn't satisfy and become angry. And then trying to find shelter in escaping one's personhood and ascribing impersonality to the ultimate source of everything. And this causes fear, because then we're left in an existential crisis, not knowing who's in charge. And then thirdly, krodha, we become cynical. As Prabhupada interprets the verse I'm mentioning from the Bhagavad Gita, krodha means cynicism. And I just want to say a little bit more about cynicism. I have a few notes here, if you'll indulge me. Because yesterday, which is our little laboratory downtown San Francisco, to experiment on introducing straightforward Krishna consciousness into a population. The controlled experiment. We cordon off an area of San Francisco and take the population that's there, that's moving through there, as our subject to experiment on, and we introduce them to a kind of condescension in which we say, we have knowledge, please accept it, and then we look to see what the natural reactions are. So, Sri Antariksha Prabhu and Apara Garangi told me that yesterday one of the people they approached was smoking a cigarette. And that when they approached him and offered him a book on meditation, he said, why don't you try this kind of meditation? And Sri Antariksha Prabhu said that he was only half joking. So we're trying to analyze the psychology of that person. And one of the reaction that he had could be described as cynical, in this sense, that cynicism commonly acts as a form of psychological self-protection, and that expecting the worst reduces emotional disappointment, distrusting others avoids vulnerability, and making sarcastic or bleak interpretations creates emotional distance from what could hurt. This overlaps with avoidant coping rather than engaging. The person withdraws mentally by assuming outcomes are meaningless or insincere. And this is a general description of those who have accepted the material world as their ultimate home. This has not gone unnoticed by others. For instance, in his allegory, which I've mentioned several times, which comes back into context here, of Plato and the cave dwellers. There's an interesting phenomena in the cave dweller analogy, which is, just as a reminder, for those who may not have heard this before, that he compares the material world, does Plato, to a cave in which people sit facing a wall. Behind them there's fire. In front of them there's some puppeteers who are moving images so that there's shadows on the wall of these puppets, silhouettes. And they accept those as reality, and they've been entranced in looking at those and interacting with them and interpreting them since as long as they can remember. So they accept that as reality. But when one person, Plato says, somehow breaks away from that trance and goes out into the great outdoors, sees the sunlight and real forms. Of course, we know they're not real, and so does Plato, because he said beyond the forms of the material world in general, which he says are shadow-like, there's real forms. And that's our instruction from guidance from Kṛṣṇa in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Urdhva mulamada shakam ashvatam prahara avyayam chandamsi yasya paranani yastam veda saveda vid. He begins the description of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita about how we're looking at the reflection. We're in a cave-like situation here in the material world. It's a closed system. It's closed from the light of the spiritual world. We have a fire, which is the sun, and it's revealing shadows only here in the material world. And when that person goes out into the real world, in this analogy, and sees the light and sees real forms and color and human interaction, and then comes back in the cave, what's the reaction of the people when that person describes what the outer world is like and says, no, this isn't reality? Well, they want to kill him. That's one of the reactions. They say they'll become violent against him and may even want to kill him. And this is a psychological reaction which has to do with several factors. Pardon? Yeah, cynicism in the extreme, but I'll tell you more about psychologically, the cave dwellers aren't evaluating his message. They're defending their belief system and identity. This is a kind of cognitive dissonance because his reality contradicts everything they think is true. Accepting it would mean admitting that they were wrong, duped, or blind. That mental conflict feels unbearable, so the messenger becomes the target. It's a threat to the status hierarchy. In the cave, those who interpret the shadows best are seen as wise. The enlightened person returning suddenly shifts the hierarchy. He exposes their truth experts as mistaken. Eliminating him symbolically preserves their social order. A lot of vested interest. Fear of uncertainty. The cave is limiting, but it's predictable. Real reality is vast, complex, and destabilizing. His message feels like chaos returning. People often attack what makes the world feel less manageable. This is one of the points Prabhupada makes about krodha, or anger, is that it's people hear many different ideas and they find them to be destabilizing. Better to hang on to what the status quo is right now and not challenge reality, because what are we going to do if it's not right? And then projection of anger. They feel mocked or deceived by the possibility of a bigger truth. And they project the anger onto him. You're lying, trying to confuse us or making us look foolish. So the violent reaction isn't about truth, it's about the truth forces them to confront what the truth forces them to confront about themselves. So this is Prabhupada's interpretation of krodha, or anger, in the material world, that when someone brings in an alternative idea of what reality is, people feel like they're destabilized and they become cynical about it. And cynicism is a psychological reaction, as we're discussing, for self-protection. It also allows people a sense of identity as an authority in something. There's thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. And often and always, a thesis is challenged. People discuss it from different points of view, and then there's antitheses to that thesis. And then there's an inevitable synthesis to bring together the various ideas in harmony so that they work. But some people find that the antithesis is a better business because it makes them an authority on something, and they just stay there. They don't come into this synthesis or try to harmonize the ideas. They stay as the dissenters against the thesis. And what I'm saying is that it gives them a sense of, well, it gives them something to do and a status, that we're against the thesis. And instead of coming together, as is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Siddhanta Bolaya Chitinakara Alash, Iha Hoite Lage Sudrad Manash. Kaviraj Goswami says, don't ignore arguing about the thesis. Talk about it thoroughly threadbare until you come to a synthesis, which is a siddhanta, a clarity about what it is, what it isn't, from discussing it, and don't be alash or lazy about it. But some people then, they just want to take a sectarian view and not harmonize it because then they have a special status in the world. And it may also relate to those who take up conspiracy theories, because who can ultimately argue against a conspiracy theory which has no basis if somebody just keeps claiming that it's true? But that gives them a soapbox to speak from. Sorry for the cliche, but there's a way in which then they become a strong voice in the world, even if it's preposterous or absurd. Still, it gives them that sense. So the whole world has this kind of madness because of krodha, or cynicism, and it's self-protective. It's hard for people to entertain the idea that there may be some truth. So Prahlāda Mahārāja here gives what may be the antidote to that. First of all, he describes sa tvaṁ hi nitya-vijitātma. What is it? Guṇaḥ sva-dhāmnā. He's describing the mechanism of the material world. And he's saying that, if you want to put it back up again, it has various elements that are countable. And then he points back to the cause of all of it, which is the Supreme Independent Person. Prabhupada puts this in parenthetically to show what the purpose of all this analysis is. It's to come back to the Supreme Independent Person, who through his external energy has created the material mind, which is the cause of all suffering in the material world. And he describes his experience in this process, or being in the material world, as being crushed, niṣpīḍyamānam, as I'm being crushed by the wheel of time. And then he comes to the ultimate conclusion, which is that now I surrender to you. And this is kind of the vulnerability of the person who comes to the conclusion that I'm not the supreme controller. What's more, I'm being crushed by the wheel of time, and therefore, Krishna, please save me. if you could scroll down just a little more for word, please. Keep going. And go back up. Actually, I have the book here. I can look for myself. It'd be easier. He names Ishvara, Ajayaya, Ishvara. You're the supreme controller. So, this is the antidote to cynicism, also to raga and fear of personal existence, is to hear from Prahlāda Mahārāja, who has full experience, as he's described before, when he saw his father gain everything in the material world and then lose it. His father was very cynical. In fact, when he propitiated Brahma for all these powers, it almost seemed, he was so obsequious that it seemed absurd and possibly cynical. He was approaching Brahma as, you're the supreme controller. And he named him as, you're the supreme. And meanwhile, he was asking him for a benediction that Brahma couldn't give and that he couldn't handle at the same time. But he ignored that, and that's the ignorance of the material world. We find some place to take shelter in this material world, but it'll ultimately fail. So it's the ultimate description of how cynicism fails or misplaced surrender fails in this story in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And to hear Prahlāda Mahārāja come out and say, okay, here's how the material world works. I'm being crushed under that wheel, and please give me shelter, is a great relief to anyone who's suffering in the material world and tries to find alternative ways to maneuver here without taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hearing this ultimate solution, which is to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and to give up the idea of cynicism. I recalled when I was thinking about this, an incident when I was in Montreal, Canada, at the Rath Yatra. And I was behind the book booth, and a fellow came over who was extremely cynical. He was dripping with cynicism. He was leaning on the booth looking at me, and I addressed him, and he didn't respond exactly to what I said. He just said, you know, this whole thing is a mental construct. And I said, what whole thing? And he said, whatever you're doing here, this is just a mental construct. And we talked for a little while about that. I have a picture of him. Actually, I gave him a garland. And the picture of him, and he's wearing the garland, but he has a slight smile and a slight, how he did this, like the Mona Lisa. He has a slight smile, but also you can see the cynicism in his face at the same time. Like, what are these guys doing to me? But what brought the conversation to perhaps a conclusion was, although he argued in different ways about how whatever we were doing was a mental construct, I said, well, anyway, we still have to die, and so do you. And he was shocked when I said that, because generally it's taboo to mention death, that we're all going to die. You can experiment over the holidays when you're home with your family. People always wonder, in fact, there's radio shows about what to say when you're with your family. And somebody was just talking to me the other day, somebody outside this circle of devotees was saying, you know, when I get together for Thanksgiving and I bring up different topics about gratitude, he said it doesn't go very far. People aren't used to that. They don't talk about things like that. He said it gets halfway around the table and then the conversation changed. So he could suggest, why don't you bring up death? and see how that goes over. And say, yeah, well, we have to die. Let's talk about that for a while. And he showed the same kind of shock and immediate disdain for what I had said. And it's not my fault. I just brought it up. It's a conversation about mental constructs, but Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, mrityu sarva haraschaham, that when you fail to come to this conclusion of realigning with your eternal purpose and your dharma as a servant of the Lord, which is so abundant and sweet, then you remain in this crushing process. Niṣpīḍyamānam upakarsha vipoprapanam. And he didn't have much more to say about that. But Krishna says, I'll help you out with this experience by crushing everything that you think you have. Someone brought up on the class I was giving this week to the Bhaktivedanta students, they said, well, Krishna, he comes and steals things from you. But he not only steals the butter, but he also breaks the pot. And he said some people were complaining about that, and that, well, okay, if he takes the butter, but if he breaks the pot, apparently metaphorically means their mental construct or whatever they think they own in their life. And when I thought about it for a few minutes, then we took the conversation in a way that if Krishna breaks the pot, maybe that can be an opening for us, for us to realize that the kind of structure we think we have in this material world is being crushed before our very eyes. Why hold on to it? Why not find shelter in reality? Why try to kill the messenger also? Which that guy in Montreal looked like he wanted to kill me when I brought up death. So Prahlāda says it for everybody. He just said, I'm feeling this. I'm being crushed. Everything's being crushed. The pot's being broken. Krishna's taking the butter, everything. But those who appreciate how Krishna's taking from us is ultimately, in his pastimes, is very charming. And if we come to that point in our lives to see that he's helpfully crushing our disillusionment, and we don't remain cynical, if we're able to analyze it as Prahlāda's analyzing it and see that this is preparing us for reality. Don't kill the messenger. Don't become cynical for self-protection. Don't try to maintain the status quo in the material world and become angry at the message itself. Try to embrace it. Try to find the wisdom in it and see if that mindset, non-cynical mindset like Prahlāda Mahārāja has, doesn't put you in a sanguine position here in this world. Those are a few initial thoughts, and plenty of room for discussion, I hope. So let's discuss. And we have Vaikuntha Nayaka from Mysore, home of Mysore Pak. Yes, Vaikuntha Nayaka, please give us one of your thoughtful conundrums, and you have to unmute before you do it. He can't unmute? We've locked everybody down.
Okay, now I can. Dandavats Maharaj, Dandavats to all the wonderful devotees at ISV. I hope you had a great time yesterday. When you told this story of Plato's The Cave, I was reminded of a similar story. It's a classic by H.G. Wells. I think it's called The Country of the Blind. And it's a similar idea where there's a mountaineer, he gets into an accident and he falls into a village of blind people. And he thinks, wow, this is my chance in the kingdom of the blind. The one-eyed is the king. I can now guide them. And he tries to explain to them the concept of sight and how it's a very powerful thing that you have. But on the contrary, he is overwhelmed by the people in the village who thinks that he is crazy. This mountaineer is crazy. And they offer to cure him of his blindness, of his, rather, they feel that, okay, this guy is confused. He's talking about things of seeing something and the sorts. They tell him that, okay, hey, we can cure you of your confusion. We can gouge out your eyes. And and so he has that decision to do, like, and at the point when he is with these villagers, he thinks that maybe these villagers are right, and maybe the problem is with me. And the, whether we call it peer pressure or the conformity bias. So there are two versions of the story. One version says that, okay, he also becomes one with them, and the other version says that he escapes from them. Um, but I was just thinking how it is, like, when we try to preach Krishna consciousness to our family or to people around, they think we are crazy. So I think we have that choice whether we actually blend in with them or we keep away from them. And also, I was thinking this is very close to your message of book distribution, that you pick the ripe fruit, right? And you don't try to make the blind man see light. You look for someone who's more welcoming of that. Just a couple of thoughts which I thought will help
It
expand the
did help.
conversation.
Very helpful. Thank you. It's also the direction of Rupa Goswami that we should explore our participation in Krishna consciousness from various angles of vision. Don't take it for granted, niyamagraha. Because one may also become part of groupthink, that one's part of an organization, therefore the nomenclature, the ways in which we're doing it are perfect. They may or may not be, according to the ways that people are applying it or their intention in applying it. So we should also be non-cynical, but curious about what we're doing and why we're doing it regularly. That's part of niyamagraha. So that at any time, we shouldn't think that, well, because I'm part of an organization, therefore I'm immune from these psychological effects, raga, bhaya, krodha. One, after all, Prabhupada mentions in raga, he said even a sannyasi can then become attached to the paraphernalia of a sannyasi. So he said, of course, there are fewer items to become attached to. Maybe there's a danda and a water pot, and maybe the status. But one should constantly be analyzing how am I applying this in my own life, and not assume that I'm immune from the psychological anomalies of the material world. Okay, let's see a few more.
May I ask one question on that
Yes.
aspect of cynicism? I was just thinking, the cynicism sometimes saves us time, right? If we recognize the cynicism in the other person, we actually move on to other person who is someone who is more receptive to Krishna consciousness, right? Um, but we also see that, okay, how Srila Prabhupada, his god brothers were cynical, but Prabhupada was not, and he decided that, okay, he could maybe, he was not cynical. So sometimes cynicism helps, sometimes it does not. So any suggestions on how we should employ this, how we should decide between the two when we are trying to reach out to people?
I wasn't clear about how, in your example of how it helped.
How if we recognize the cynicism in others, that, okay, he is being cynical, we don't waste time on that person.
Well, that's how it
In
helps.
that way, yeah. And we actually move on to the ripe fruits. But Prabhupada actually, maybe that's what Prabhupada's God brothers were thinking, that ripe fruits are all in India. But then Prabhupada actually proved them wrong, and he made ripe fruits everywhere. So
Yeah, that's
sometimes it can stop us from achieving something wonderful.
well. When I heard from Sri Antariksha and Aparagarangi about this guy smoking a cigarette, they gave more nuance. They say he was only half cynical, which is an observation. It's a deep observation, because they were saying that actually he was partly smiling when he said it, and then when he said, take one of these for meditation, and he saw their immediate reaction, which was very pure and innocent, like they're not interested. Like you would drive by a fast food place, it's not like you think, well, let me pull in there. They didn't hesitate and go like, well, maybe not now, you know. They just said no. And he recognized that in them. And then to some degree, well, let me hear Sri Antariksha. Tell us about this person and how you analyzed him.
Hare Krishna. So he was initially, he was smoking, and then he said that, would you like to meditate with me with this? So we said, no, we don't do that. Oh, really? You don't want to do this? This is meditation. And then I said, no, we don't do that kind of meditation. And then he understood, and then he was, he was smiling when he was saying, but yeah, as you said, Maharaj, that there was some degree of he wanted to taunt in one sense, but also he was, at the end he was smiling.
So, in the process of teaching Krishna consciousness, as you mentioned, we have to analyze people and interpret what their state of mind is. And that takes some practice. First of all, we meet people oftentimes who seem like they wouldn't be interested. For instance, yesterday in San Francisco, I made a resolution that I would talk to everybody and not some people, and I wouldn't prejudge anybody. That was my discipline for yesterday. And I think anybody that was with me can attest to the fact that I didn't spare anybody. Radha Kripa's there. I didn't spare anybody because I just made it a mindset that whoever I see, whoever's approaching, I will try to make a conscious interaction with them and see what's inside and try to find out how ripe or not ripe they are. And in that process, I was often surprised that people who, if I had thought about it more when they were approaching, I might have just said that person won't stop, they have kids, or they don't look like they're interested. But then I found that surprisingly, people stopped, some of them who I thought wouldn't have been interested. And when we're experimenting in the world and we find that we don't know what's inside, then we remain a little open and hopeful. And also there's ways in which if we see a glimmer, like a spark, and we have this, we got from Prabhupada, he said, fan the spark. If you see a little spark and you fan it, then sometimes it turns into a blaze and it can be unexpected. Did anybody have that experience? That somebody had a little spark and then you fanned it and then they came? Yes.
I have a real world example and a Krishna conscious example. I'll go for the real world one first. So when I was camping, we couldn't get a fire. This was like in October, I think. So then one spark lit and then people had to blow really hard. And I guess it was kind of fanning it, and then the fire started. And then for Krishna conscious, I slowly started to get books from other people book distributing. And then that set a blaze in my heart. And then now I started book distributing. Like yesterday, I was able to distribute 16 Gitas.
Haribo. So, yes, we should make some discrimination, but Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya, went to the house of a so-called sannyasi, and part of the interaction was that person said, "Do you want some Ananda?" And Lord Chaitanya asked Lord Nityananda, he said, "What does he mean, Ananda?" He said, "He means wine." And then they immediately excused themselves and they went out and they jumped in the Ganga and swam all the way to Advaitacharya's house. The author says, Vrindavan Das Thakur, he said, just see how merciful they were. they're cognizant of who the person was, but they went to the house of somebody who's so-called sannyasi and drinking wine. And Lord Chaitanya had a really beautiful interaction with him because he tried to give Mahaprabhu a blessing. He said, you'll have happiness in the material world. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, oh, that's not really a blessing. And then this older person replied and said, just see the state of the world now. I give a perfectly good benediction, and this mere child, he was 24 years old, is now trying to instruct me about the nature of happiness and so forth. So we can see that Mahaprabhu interacted with different kinds of people just to encourage them. And this is the idea. We try to fan the spark wherever we see it. And in the process, we can be amazed that there's some impetus. Yesterday, I met a whole group of young people. They were in maybe high school, and they were a rugby team. They were all together and looked like they were out in the fresh air and trying to find something fun to do. But they all stopped, and I told them what we were doing. And out of the group, and how many are on a rugby team? Anybody know? Maybe there were 12 of them or something like that. And out of all of them, one in the back leaned in and he goes, oh, is this Hinduism? And I said, for sake of keeping the conversation going and not getting really philosophical, I just said, yes. And he said, oh, I've studied that. I studied it. I know this. And I pointed out to all the other ones, see, he knows this. And he said, yeah, this is like the thing where all paths lead to the same place, right? And I said, yeah, sure. And all the other ones, they're all charged up with the city air, and they wanted to move on, but he stayed. And even though they all walked, he wanted to take the book, and he wanted to give a donation. And I could see out of the group, and others saw that, Radhakripa Prabhu mentioned afterwards, just see, out of that group of 12, one person had a spark, and then they wanted to take that. So we're like miners. We have to pan for gold and look in and see where is that gold? Yes.
That reminded me of, we were distributing at Santana Row, and there were a group of Christian girls and boys. They're from a church. You see, everybody was wearing a cross. But one of the girls was walking out, you're saying, no, it's just for today, we're giving away these books on meditation. And she said, oh, I have read that book. One of the girls said. So the other guy is asking, what's that? What's that? I said, this is a very good book. And that's it. So I started giving to everybody. One of the guys was there. He's looking at them and says, I can't believe you guys are doing this. And she says, you should read it too. Here, take one. So I was just thinking that when a group of youth come together and they just want to take it, if one takes it, then it's like a ripple effect. Everybody will start taking it. And if one says no, then nobody else will take it. I just wanted to come in. I also wanted to say that we had a fantastic, I think this is probably, I don't know, Manani, we've never been there, right? So first time, and I felt that out of, if we met 1,000, more than 1,000 people were there, but if we met 1,000, at least 700 were youth. I don't know why they ended up all going to the mall. It was just opposite to the Westphal, the Valley Fair Mall, and everybody took. And we gave a lot of Bhagavad Gitas. We had a lot of youth with us, and Raseshwari and myself were there. And many of them took Bhagavad Gita. But the end result was around 5:45, there was a shooting in the mall. And so everybody, we had already just started packing, and we put our stuff. And we were there, and we saw everybody running out of the mall. Well, of course, we also panicked. We got into our cars and we left. But the most important thought that Raseshwari had was very nice. She said, so many people took it. Almost 600. I think we gave out 300 Bhagavad Gitas and 300 of other books. But so many people were so happy and took it. She says, today they will surely open up the book, hopefully, because they'll still have it in their bag and open and see that, how this is going to help. Hopefully that's going to help. Thank you.
The reason they're all down there at Santana Row is because everything's closed in San Francisco. There's no more mall. It's all closed. And that's crushing process. People think everything's fine, but then they realize I'm being crushed. And then, as you said, they may open the book, because where are they going to turn if they feel the crushing process? The earthquake comes, some disaster, and everyone starts thinking at that time, what should I do? So the benefit of our teachings, of Prahlāda Mahārāja's teachings, is to figure out ahead of time that everything's being broken. It's all being crushed up in a big wheel right now. So therefore, put your full attention on what's most important. Okay, yes, Bhakti Tim, and then Mayapur.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for today's class. I really like the cave allegory. I was thinking that when someone is locked up in a cave and all they're seeing is the shadows on the wall, they become conditioned. And so when someone has mercy and lets one of them out, he cuts the rope. And after the rope is cut, that person would ascend into the light. And so it reminded me of last week's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We discussed Kaliya. And Kaliya looks like a knotted rope. And he's out in the light. He's in the spiritual world. And he's extremely offensive. And he's doing very bad things. He's killed the cows, poisoned the gopas. And he's attempting to bite Krishna and strangle Krishna. But the mood with Krishna is different. Like we were talking about crushing. Krishna could have easily crushed him, because Krishna holds all the universes within his mouth. He could have easily became heavier than the heaviest and smashed him. But I think Krishna has that understanding that Kaliya is not such a bad person, so he dances on him, and it humbles Kaliya. And so it was just reminding me of all this discussion of distributing of books and having that mercy and going out and not trying to crush the people, but having mercy. And when you go out for books, oftentimes you dance like how Krishna dances on Harinam anyway. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Haribol. Also in that pastime, something very subtle happens, because Krishna's dancing on the hoods of Kaliya. And his wives, who are pure devotees, the Nagapatnis, began offering prayers when they saw that Kali had become exhausted, and he put down his hoods. He stopped fighting. He had reduced his poison almost to nil. And then his wives began to say, we understand how he was atheistic. They called him atheistic, and they said that actually he deserved everything he got from you. Even though he's our husband, we know that he was bad. And he even deserved to die. But then they said, we noticed that after you danced on his head, he changed. They recognized in him that his countenance, they knew him probably better than anybody, right? Like a wife knows the husband, can understand. His countenance has changed. So they said, but now he's changed. And the acharyas said they recognized in him that he was open. So there's something subtle when we're interacting with people, where if we're practicing Krishna consciousness, we'll be able to see that spark in other people. There was a guy who looked close to homeless, although it's hard to tell in San Francisco. It's kind of a look. I don't know, they must have a store where it's like, hey, you want to look homeless? Sure. But he was really nice. He gave me his lighter, because that's all he could pull out. And lighters are very useful for puja, so I always like to extract those. And I always notice how attached everyone is, because like, how am I going to smoke pot after this? But he handed it over. And he came and he sat down in the Harinam. You know that guy who was sitting right on the street, and he was just listening to the Harinam, and he was into it. He just seemed like one of the devotees. And you could sense something in him. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't trying to taunt the devotees. He wasn't just mad out of his head with alcohol, but he actually had some interest in it. And that's the mood of the devotees like Shivananda Sain. That dog ran in when everyone was walking down to Jagannath Puri, all the pure devotees, and they're chanting and they're walking to see Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this dog, the dogs in India, they're not all fluffy coats. I mean, I don't know at that time, but street dogs, they have a really hard life because they have no master. They just have to defend themselves and get in with the alpha dog and protect themselves by being part of a pack. But this dog broke off, and it's dangerous for them. Anyway, I'll go into the story. The dog got in with the pack, and Shivananda Sain said, he's with us. That impetus to join the devotees. So what if he ran in, he said he wants to be with us. Feed him, make sure you feed him. He told the head cook to every day make sure he gets his 2 cups of rice. They cook rice and the dog ate it. And then when the dog didn't get his rice, and who knows what the causality was, but he asked, where's the dog? The dog's gone. I forgot to feed him. And Shivananda Sain became disturbed. He was morose. He was sad. And everyone felt sad. This is the heart of the devotee who feels sad for people, paradukha dukhi. And if he sees a little impetus, then he takes it and says, please come. That's the highest way of worshiping Krishna, is to be out amongst all the people. Prabhupada loved that. He came all the way from Vrindavan to be with people in whom he saw some spark, and he would always fan it and bring it to the surface. It's the best way to see Krishna in everybody, because they're all devotees of Krishna, and it can come out at any time. Okay, who is next? Yes. Oh, yes. Mayapur Vihari, and then Brajaras Bhavana. And then Tadiya Seva. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the nice class. Maharaj, I had a question. How as a aspiring devotee, how would I know if I'm being cynical towards certain things where I should not be? Some things are obviously white and some things are obviously black, but the middle road. For example, and I'll boil down to my question, I surrounded by many devotees at ISV, observe, we talk about Vastu a lot. And I'm somehow not much into it. But then I see that there are devotees whom I consider my Siksha gurus, very senior. The discussions often go into that. So I often wonder, am I being cynical? You just mentioned no one should feel I'm beyond certain things. At the same time, you also mentioned one should not take shelter of material things. So
the best answer I heard to that was from a devotee named Devakinandan Prabhu. He's from Singapore. He's the head counsel for ISKCON. He's an international attorney. He gave class in Mayapur. Last time I was there, I sat in his class, and I appreciated it very much. And somebody, actually it was Shukadev Swami from South India, I think he was from Andhra, he asked this question. It was time of Kumbh. A lot of people go into the Kumbh, which is trying to be at the right place at the right time to get some material benediction. Prabhupada generally went to the Kumbh to preach, because he said, that's where all the people are, let's feed them prasadam and distribute tons of books. But most people are going there because I'm going to catch some benediction on my head. So he asked, did Shukadev Swami, that how is it that devotees know well that we just take shelter of Krishna? We don't need these remedials. And he mentioned the Kumbh, and then he mentioned astrology, and he didn't mention the V word. And that's Vastu. And his answer was thoughtful and measured. He said, devotees know that they only need to take shelter of Krishna. He said, but material life is niṣpīḍyamānam. It's a crushing process. It's so hard. It's like if you've ever hung from a bar, after like 30 seconds, unless you really practice at it, you're like, I got to let go. But no, keep going. You got a minute on here. And your mind's going, how am I going to hold on? And that's how we feel in the material world, because we're hanging on by a thread. In fact, I have a ritual in my relationship with one of my godbrothers. When I hadn't seen him for a few months, and then I just got out of my car, he was there. I said, "How are you doing?" He goes, "Hanging by a thread." So whenever I see him, he says, "How are you?" I said, "Hanging by a thread." And that's what we are in this world, hanging by a thread or hanging from a bar over a big pit. At any time, you can give up your grip and just fall off. So it's onerous. It's a padam yad vipadam. Any next step, you could trip and fall and anything could happen. So devotees, although they know their ultimate goal and ultimate shelter is Krishna, samashritaye padapalavaplavam, they know all that, he said. But at the same time, due to this intense pressure of the crushing process, they'd like to try to take a peek and see, is there any relief in the meantime? So there's like, let's look at the astrology. It's like, okay. And what does astrology tell them? They said, you're going to have some ups, you're going to have some downs. Then they'll go up, then it'll go down. Everybody has something mixed in because that's the way it goes in the material world. It's a rough ride. But if anything can cushion it to some degree, then devotees think, let me do that. So his answer was so expert because he didn't get into such a cut and dry thing where he just said, like, these guys are in Maya and they're not really devotees, or, we don't need that, it's nonsense. And Prabhupada gave a similar answer when Pradyumna asked him about astrology. He said, isn't it in our Siddhanta? And Prabhupada said, no. He said, but if you know it's going to rain, you take an umbrella. So the way we can judge is first of all, is keep first things first. If whatever arrangement we're making here in the material world limits our chanting of Hare Krishna, or it dissuades us from our services, I can't do it because this, that, then, as is explained by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, this is mixed devotional service. What's pure devotional service? He gives the example of the prayer given before Lord Shiva and Parvati by Narayanak Paraksarve Nakutaschana Bhibyati Swarga Pavarga Narakeshu Apitulyartha Darshana. By? Huh? Okay, so he says in this prayer that pure devotee just depends on Narayan. Narayanak Paraksarve Nakutaschana Bhibyati has one-minded attention to his service. And therefore, heaven or hell, he sees as equal. It's tulya. Whether you go to hell or you go to heaven. Chitraketu, thank you. I was thanking Super Soul because nobody else said it here. Chitraketu says this, and he said, this is the modus operandi of a pure devotee. It's accept whatever condition one's in. But if there's some slight adjustment you can make without distracting from service or thinking that I need to worship demigods in order to do devotional service, this is an errant idea. Or that I can't do something until I make a special arrangement. No, Narayana Paraksarvena Kutaschana Bhibyati. But when people build temples or they get a house, if there's one place that may be better than another, then you can try for it. But don't waylay your devotional service in the meantime. And if there's an opportunity to go on preaching, Prabhupada came to America. The first temple I moved into did not have great vastu. It was on Valencia Street in the Mission. When I told my parents when I was 16 I was moving into the Mission district, they were aghast. Because the place was full of derelicts and drunks and sex shops and who knows what else there. And that's where you're going to live? What was our temple before we bought it? It was a funeral home. It used to have dead bodies in it. Prabhupada purchased it, or the devotees did. Jayananda bought it. They brought in a bunch of cow dung and spread it on everything. And they got to the work of, and it turned out that that particular center became very productive. Hundreds and hundreds of devotees were made there, and millions of books were distributed. And that was the top temple in book distribution in the world, San Francisco. Prabhupada always kept mentioning it in letters that I'm going to San Francisco first because they're distributing more books than anybody. He rubs it in for everybody. That's why I'm going to San Francisco. So we could have said, wait till we find the Vastu-ready place. And he could have said, wait till it's Vastu, then move in. But he didn't. So we have to balance the whole things. Yes, the umbrella, but if you got to run across the field without an umbrella to distribute a Bhagavatam set, we'll go without the umbrella and get the Bhagavatam set distributed. And there's also in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which Lord Chaitanya practically dictated to Sanatana Goswami and said, like this, like that. So there's a section about when and where to take initiation from a guru. You'll go for 7 pages with all kinds of shastric details about where and when you can take initiation from a guru to make it auspicious. And at the very end, and I wish I had skipped to the end, he says, but if the guru decides he or she will give you the initiation in the middle of a rice field when you weren't expecting it, you take it, because that's all auspicious. So there's a balance to these things. It's there in Shastra, and yes, it's a good idea, but don't wait necessarily, stay in the transcendental vibration and keep your preaching going. And remember, heaven or hell, we go on. There's a great shelter in staying in the process of chanting and giving Krishna consciousness to other people. Oh, okay, we're almost done. And it's Brajaras Bhavana was next. And then we're going to Diya Seva. And I'll keep my answers short.
I wanted to hear more on the psychology of the person in the cave dweller story that went out, and when he comes back, he also might face some cognitive dissonance with the group being against him, and also being it goes both ways. So I was wondering if you could comment on that, and then also if you could comment on, let's say there's another cave deeper inside, someone who hears from this person that went outside but hasn't actually gone outside. How can they then continue convincing others? Do they need to see the outside, or can they convince without that?
I don't have immediate recall of exactly in the allegory of how that person who went out deals with it on the inside. But maybe we can just bring it to a more personal level. And we have experience in many cases of, as humans, in social settings where we bring up something that's not the status quo. For instance, if you have a morning program and you just rush through the 10 offenses, if you don't just rush through the 10 offenses without really listening to them, then people think like, well, you're not following the morning program. Or if somebody mispronounces a word and then you don't mispronounce it, then everyone thinks you're doing the wrong thing. That's also possible. And so that's why I said we have to be careful of niyamagraha and just accepting the status quo. And also, personally, I've been through cases where I lived with a Prabhupada said this, and then later on saw for myself that he said something slightly different. And I say, okay, we'll adjust that. Your question is about how we should deal with the situation. Could you say it in one sentence?
Yeah, it's like if we are that person that goes out, how do we deal with that cognitive dissonance that may come from challenging a group?
Yes. By having a solid, being solidly grounded in association with somebody that you trust, or that you have guidance. Because everyone gravitates to various aspects of Krishna consciousness, and there may be some there will be cognitive dissonance when you're in groups of people. So it's important to know your brand and to have those who represent that that you can consult with and come back to a sense of resonance rather than dissonance. I have that in my life because there are various, since the very beginning of ISKCON, there have been lots of different ebbs and flows and different ideas coming and going and so forth. And of course there's Prabhupada's books, but then there's people who I find are generally equipoised and learned. They live in their life in a very balanced way. They don't go off into the antithesis and become part of the conspiracy theory advocates. And they're able to balance the two things at one time. That there's going to be differences of opinion, but they find a place to live in that. And I tend to want to associate with such people who are able to accommodate those things and have discussions. Siddhanta bole chitanakar alash, iha hoite Kṛṣṇa laged sudrimanash. We've been through various iterations of what a guru is in ISKCON, as an example. And during those times, I became studious in reading Shastra, talking to devotees who had more experience, who were there when Prabhupada said this or that, and I did my due diligence to have a clearer understanding. I read a really good book by Veerabahu Prabhu, who wrote something very straightforwardly from Prabhupada's writings that said, the Guru and what Prabhupada said. I'm just giving this as an example. And reading that cleared a lot of, and other things, had cleared a lot of the dissonance that was there, because there's been a lot of dissonance that from various points of view, and still is. So one has to do one's own due diligence and find out those people who are balanced, equipoised, learned in Shastra, where you can have discussion and ask questions and come to a proper understanding of yourself. Otherwise, what are you going to do if you don't use your own intelligence and try to figure it out, right? Okay, last thing, and how is it always that Tadiya Seva is last? It better be good. Okay, go for it.
Maharaj, I just want to make a comment. Every year I visit my parents after going to Yatra, and sometimes I meet my school friends and my relatives also. So when I see them, I watch them, closely, how their lives are, whether they are happy or not, and what is their philosophy or guiding philosophy. And I'm very happy that, I'm on the right path, I'm on the right track, because when I see them, I see they are totally taken into sense gratification. Their lives are not steady. Sometimes they are very unhappy. I can see frustration in their lives. And so what I want to say is, if one doesn't take to the path of Krishna consciousness, they are carried away by their mental chariot, mind chariot. Whatever the mind dictates, they do those things. And ultimately, when you do such things, the end result is misery and unhappiness and lamentation. So I have to say that, we are protected within our ISKCON society by devotee association, right philosophy. Right philosophy means definitely right philosophy. Even Srila Prabhupada once said, religion without philosophy is a sentiment, and a philosophy without religion is a mental speculation. So I just want to make that point. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Tadiya Seva. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Panchatattva, Shri Radha Madan Mohan, if you so desire, please keep us aligned with Prahlāda Mahārāja's mood and method for overcoming Ragabhaya Krodha by surrendering to Krishna, the ultimate cure for all woes. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, please say Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And now we have a presentation by the future leaders of ISKCON of Silicon Valley. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you so much. Dear Prabhu, dear Vaisesika Mahārāja, thank you for a wonderful Saturday morning Bhagavatam class and a lot of meditations on the Sankirtan yesterday. We are all feeling very uplifted and happy that we were able to be a small part, but still a part of Lord Chaitanya's mission. And today we'll be having a presentation by Anya on when to apologize and when not to.
Hare Krishna. My name is Anya and I am 12 years old. Today I will be presenting on Chapter 2 from the Bhagavad Viveka by Kṛṣṇa Das. Today I will talk about intentional versus accidental mistakes. I will tell the story of King Parikshit and how he makes an accidental mistake when he puts the snake on the sage. I will also tell the story of King Chitraketu when he makes an intentional mistake of insulting Lord Shiva and Lord Parvati. Now I would like to talk about the difference between honest and dishonest people. Honest people may accidentally offend someone, but sincerely apologize, while dishonest people may offend someone knowingly and try to justify or cover up their mistakes. For honest people, the Lord may excuse them with a small punishment, but for dishonest people, if these people take advantage of the Lord, then they will be punished and fall into the clutches of Maya. A mistake is truly a mistake if one fails to learn from it. Honorable people learn from their mistakes, regret them, apologizes, atones, and genuinely tries to fix them, and does not repeat them again. You can perfect your life by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, as King Parikshit does. You can ruin your life by having a false ego, which would lead to no regret for mistakes and depression. To become an honorable person, you should remember to acknowledge your mistakes. This will result in staying humble and remaining humble. One important thing which devotees don't want is others to suffer for their mistakes. For example, if my friend litters and then her family member has a bad day, then her family member would be suffering for her mistake. You should always remember why and why not to apologize. In King Parikshit's story, he accepted his curse and heard Srimad Bhagavatam. King Parikshit does not apologize because he did not want to make the sage feel worse about the unproportionate punishment. In King Chitraketu's story, Parvati curses him to become a demon, and he apologizes for any offense he may have committed. The attitude behind an apology is also very important. Apologizing is not a ritual, but it's a heartfelt response of one's emotion. This means that if I apologize to someone for losing their toy, but I don't actually mean it, then that would not be a proper apology. One example of this is when Kṛṣṇa lifted Govardhan to protect the people of Vrindavan from Indra, who was pouring rain from the heavens. Sincere apologies attract forgiveness. Noble people don't hold grudges for sincere apologies. And if they offend others, they ask for forgiveness. And when others offend them, they forgive them sincerely. We ask for Krishna's forgiveness, and we are hopeful for Lord's mercy. Making a mistake is common, but honest people regret them, reflect on them, and remember them, so they don't do it again. The moral of this chapter is that mistakes are bound to happen, but how you fix a mistake is the most important. Thank you.
Nice presence, Anja, you have. And your presentation flowed well.
Thank you.
I have a question about Chitraketu.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about how his mistake is distinct, and did he not apologize? Can you say more about what makes his different from Parikshit's?
King Chitraketu apologizes for any offense he may have committed to Lord Shiva or Parvati, because he did not find the thing he said was insulting her, but Parvati may have seen that as insulting her and trying to direct something against her. So.
But you're distinguishing the two, right?
Yeah.
Parikshit gave, you're saying, a sincere apology, but Chitraketu's was insincere?
No. Chitraketu's was sincere, but King Parikshit did not give an apology.
I see. Well, this topic comes up in the verse right after Apichet Sudharacharo. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, even if somebody transgresses and does something wrong, if their intention is right, then that person is to be considered saintly. And in the next verse, Prabhupada asked the question, how is it that somebody who's a pure devotee can intentionally make a mistake or fall down? And I think you answered it nicely in the point about how if they continue with the process, and that's exactly what Prabhupada says, even if they make a mistake intentionally, and this was a question that somebody asked Prabhupada, how do you know if somebody's offense was intentional or non-intentional? And he said, if they come back, then it wasn't intentional. And that's what you pointed out, which is a subtle philosophical point that I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for bringing such a nuanced presentation and for holding forth to speak the philosophy. It was very nice. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Any other questions, comments, or reflections?
I have a question. When Parikshit Maharaj, why did he not apologize to the sage?
King Parikshit? King Parikshit does not apologize to the sage because the mistake he had committed was not as proportional as the punishment he had gotten from the sage, or from the sage's son. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to comment on a few things. You're very confident, when you presented all the slides, so good job on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked your slide about, where you mentioned 7 or 8 things, one's atonement, apologize and all that, right? That was very nice. So thank you. And the pictures, right? How did you put all that pictures? They were very beautiful.
My mother and I found a couple of pictures from the web and just uploaded them onto the slideshow.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. I like the point you mentioned about that, the atonement process, how somebody can realize, reflect,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think few R words you use. Can you actually go back to that slide? I think that's a very beautiful slide. Before that, I guess. Or maybe...
I think that one is it?
No, I think there was a slide where the last paragraph was like big paragraph. Second last slide, maybe, yeah. Yes, here. Where is that part? Yeah, realize, regret, rectify, remember, and don't repeat. So I really love this point. I think if somebody follows this formula, they can rectify their mistakes and they can be a better person in the next instance. Thank you for sharing this point. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. I guess that is it. There's no more comments or questions. Thank you. So I just wanted to say that Anya and their family have been connected to the Sunday school for the last 2 years. And her dad, Mark, brings his daughters actually sometimes to help in Janmashtami garland making and so many other services which we encourage through our Sunday school. So thank you, Anya, for all that you do. And thank you to the parents for raising such a wonderful child. And her older sister was actually part of the youth club last year. So it's very wonderful that we have you connected. They moved from South Africa a few years ago, and then they started to come to this temple. Thank you. Thank you, Anya. Do we have any announcements for this week? Bhakti community?
Thank you. I want to remind everybody about Bhakti community. It's like when you give anything to your, for your family members, you give them books, but you just don't give them books. You also connect them to a devotee, you connect them to a class, you connect them to somebody who you really like. And that's the same thing we have to do with newcomers. You just don't give them books, but you connect them to somebody who if you really like. And everybody is looking, people are really looking to find somebody who is happy and find somebody who has figured it out. And I think you are all it. And it's good that you connect somebody to, connect those people to Bhakti community. So thank you, everyone.
Bhakti community is revolutionary in that it closes the gap between those that we meet and an opportunity for them to associate immediately in the right environment. So I highly recommend keeping the gaps closed so that we don't miss opportunities for people who are ready to become devotees and want to associate. Yesterday we met several people. One of them was a security guard in front of the bank, and he accosted me as I was trying to walk away, and he wanted to ask a bunch of questions because he was observing all the devotees. And I think he had already received some books, and he had lots and lots of questions. And at the end, we got his information, because I could have just left it at that. We got his information so we could reach out and invite him to the Bhakti community, and I felt completely satisfied that we'd done everything we could to close the gap. So that's the perfection of our interactions with people, is give them the opportunity for the next step. Bhakti community is setting an example for spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. Thank you to Pavani Bhakti and Jai Madhava and their team. Hare Krishna. Now we have Malini Devi Dasi will tell us our dynamic approach to book distribution today and what we did yesterday.
Hare Krishna. So yesterday was a fantastic day. I don't know how to even explain what it was. One common theme yesterday, the whole day yesterday, was that devotees were willing to break up into small groups. That's a big thing, because I'll tell you why. Even the youth, everybody wants to come to San Francisco because that's where Vaisesika Prabhu is, that's where the Harinam happens, the main Harinam. And when we just floated the idea that maybe we should have multiple spots, smaller spots and everything, Advait Srinivasan told me, but Mataji, we will miss the Vaisesika Prabhu's Harinam. But then they just decided it's okay, we'll just make that spot a smaller spot. So we had like 6 spots yesterday. One spot we didn't even get scores yet from is Balimardhan Prabhu and Ananda Mataji. They had 2nd spot in Livermore. There's 1 spot in Livermore by the youth, headed by Advait Srinivasan and team. And then we had 1 in Santana Row where another youth team went. They also sacrificed the main Harinam. So first I wanted to give a big round of applause. And our Western Sankirtan team have been doing it for many years. They are skipping the main spot. They're sacrificing the main spot. But and one team in Seattle also who are distributing books in separation from here. But initially we thought that we won't be able to make our goal, which was at least 4,000 Bhagavad Gitas. And we were towards the end of the Harinam that was happening, when Prasadam was going on, we were not even done halfway yet. And I was telling Vaisesika Prabhu that we have a lot to go. And when Vaisesika Prabhu started the Harinam and singing Harinam, books started flying. And in the end, when we counted towards the end, we did 2,030 books at the San Francisco Harinam, which was just good. And total, across all the spots, just yesterday, we distributed close to 4,200 Bhagavad Gitas across all the spots yesterday. The teamwork is amazing. And there was one team with Aui and we also had Rimuna. They were just two small kids team. They went every place and they were not just giving out the books, they were collecting donations. I asked them, what are you asking? He says, give us some donation, whatever. And people were giving them donations. Each time they come up with, oh, I got $10, I got $5, I got $20. They did really good. And I also saw that the devotees who usually don't distribute books, that is our Vishwapati Nityananda Prabhu, he takes one case of Bhagavad Gita, he goes, and he comes smiling back from there, I'm finished. And then he comes back to the main table, let me take another one, he goes, he comes back smiling, I'm finished. So I saw that many devotees like that, who usually don't distribute books, they were doing huge. And Danakeri Chintamani Mataji, she is usually the biggest book distributor, I would say, at the San Francisco Harinam, maybe next to Sukheshwari. She actually carries a trolley and she says, give me 6 cases at a time. And she goes away from the Harinam and she distributes. And I don't know what magic she has. Each person, she says, they take the book somehow from her hand. So many devotees like that, like unsung heroes, and everybody did their part. And that's how we were able to do so many books in one day. And congratulations to all the devotees, and very ecstatic that we distributed more than 4,200 Bhagavad Gitas yesterday. There are many things to share, but I'll just wanted to share 2 things that I heard from His Grace Vaisesika Prabhu, and I think it's important for the Sankirtan devotees to take this back. There was one thing is that nowadays everybody wears an earplugs in their ears or AirPods or whatever it may be. They don't look at us anyway, but they can't even hear us now because there is something in their ears. So Prabhu was mentioning yesterday that Prabhu was he was trying this new tactic that he would, when people are passing by, he would just point them to their ears. He would just point them to their ears until they notice, and then they take it as, what? Oh, we were just discussing if you were into rock music or some other kind of music. That's a conversation starter when they would take it out. So Prabhu was mentioning how workarounds bring turnarounds. So if there is something that is not working, if you can try, and then that's how turnarounds happen. So if you feel the same way like I was feeling yesterday, please try this and see if it works, to see if you can point to their ears and ask them stop and ask a question, and then opens up a conversation for us to distribute books. And the second thing that Prabhu mentioned, this is a very important point also I felt, he said that about giving donation, he said there is absolutely no obligation to give any donation, he said. And I was thinking, wow, what happens after that? But he said, but you have an opportunity to give a donation. And I think these are very important for us to hear. I'm saying it because it can be recorded so we can listen to it again and again, because these are important points. And absolutely loved the Harinam yesterday. And as Prabhu was mentioning, how if there is a spark, just fan it. We were distributing books, and one person, after everyone leaves, I always say, Hare Krishna. And then that person turned back and said, what was that? And then I said, Hare Krishna. Oh, can you teach me that? And then we taught the entire Mahamantra, and that person was open. Just saying Hare Krishna just opened up in a fire. I mean, we just fanned the spark. What was that? And after that, everybody was leaving, and then we say here, Hare Krishna. And they said, what? Hare Krishna? Everybody was repeating Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So these kind of opportunities are very, very important, because we gave them holy name, we gave them the books for them to practice. And today also, we have many, many places where we are going out. Some brave warriors who are still enthusiastic, we are going out today. And in many places, actually, December marathon starts December 1st. We start in October, but the whole month of December is open. Please come, please distribute books with us. And to experience these kind of things, we have many, many spots today. Please reach out to me if you need anything. Hare Krishna. Now we will have the grain ceremony. If you can all turn your attention towards the deities.
Savana bhavatu, savana bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvinam adityamastu ma vidvishabhai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Swastino Govinda Swastino Chutananto Swastino Vasudevo Vishnu Dharatu Swastino Narayano Narovai Swastino Padmarava Purushottam Dharatu Swastino Vishvakshena Vishveshwaraha Swastino Hrishikesho Harer Dharatu Swastino Vainatayo Hanihi Swastino Ananjana Suto Hanur Bhagavatu Dharatu Swasti, Swasti, Sumangalai, Kesho Mahan, Shri Krishna, Sakchit Ananda Ganaha, Sarveshwareshwaro Dharatu. Jai Shri Krishna, Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Today we welcome Suyash, Manasi, and Anasuya, who is a obviously highly conscious living being. Very highly conscious. Welcome, Anasuya. It's a pleasure to conduct your grain ceremony. Nirkula sends her deepest blessings for you on this day. She's a little under the weather, so she didn't want to come in. We are celebrating this occasion because Krishna is very kind, and he gives us an opportunity to know him in many ways. In the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, he says, Punyo ganda prativyam cha tejas chasmi vibhavaso jivanam sarvabhuteshu tapas chasmi tipashvisu bijamam sarvabhutanam vidipartha sanatanam bhutir buddhimantam asmi tejas vinamaham rasoam apsakonteya prabhashmi shashishurya yoho pranavaksar vivedeshu shabdake purusham nishu. The sound in ether, you can remember Krishna. The seed, you can remember Krishna. You can remember the heat and fire. You can remember the ability in any human being. When you see it, you say, that's Krishna. the fragrance of the earth. When you smell that, that's Krishna, he said. This is me. And in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva. This is the time at which we begin to notice how Krishna is kindly conducting all our affairs on our behalf to give us opportunity to use this human life to be fully conscious of Him. And it comes, Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva, in this beautiful statement. He says that I become the fire of digestion. I am the fire of digestion that digests all things. And it's noticeable at around 6 months, isn't it? Have you noticed? She starts to look at if you have rice dal chapati. No. Idli dosa? No? Okay. Whatever the whole grain food, it's quite natural for the child at this junction to say, I'll also partake at this time. It comes quite naturally. So we celebrate these natural transitions in our lives by remembering Krishna. It's very holistic and a beautiful process to remember that, okay, Krishna is the fire of digestion. Therefore, we'll worship Krishna by using our digestion. We'll take our first grains, won't we, Anasuya, today? A little something, a little Mahaprasadam, sweet rice, best of all foods in the universe. And that way honor Krishna. And it's Mahaprasadam. It's been offered to Krishna. Indicative of the lifestyle that Anasuya's come into because of momentum from her previous life. After we give her first grains, we're also going to do a prognostication to see what her inclination is. We have a mountain of Shastra on the right. We have kartals in the middle. We have a huge stack of cash. I've never seen one that big. We have jewels, bangles made of gold and diamonds and rubies and pearls. And then we have in the back some beautiful pictures and things like that. And although it seems kind of a fun thing to do, put the child in front and let her grab, it brings us to the awareness that every one of us has a predisposition towards something, and every urge we have can be engaged in Krishna service. It's such a sweet way to think of a child growing up, that whatever he or she is inclined to, then encourage. Because Krishna consciousness is not about dry renunciation. It's about engagement of our senses in the aesthetics of the world in order to please Krishna and to also purify our senses. So what a great ceremony today. And Anasuya, on your behalf and to consecrate this ceremony, we're going to chant a chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And many people in the world have heard of Bhagavad Gita. Many have the Bhagavad Gita, but very few chant the Bhagavad Gita together. So we're going to break the mold today. And we're all going to chant a chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And we pray that this goes to augment Anasuya's devotion to Lord Krishna by hearing this at around 6 months during her grain ceremony, that may the blessings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead come to her and envelop her. May she be protected at every step of her life by Krishna, and may she become a great devotee of Krishna by reading Bhagavad Gita every day. With that, let's chant Purushottam Yoga, Ata Panchamat Panchadasho Dhyayaha. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Urdhva Mulamada Shakam Ashvatam Prahuravyayam Chandamsi Yasya Paranani Yastam Veda Savedavit Adashchodvam Prashritas Tasya Shaka Guna Pravrada Vishaya Pravala Adashtamulan Anusantatani Karmanubandhini Manushaloke Narupamasyeha Tato Palabhyate Nanto Nachadir Nacha Sampratishta Ashvatamenam Suvaruda Mulam Asanga Shastrena Dridhena Chitva Tatak Padam Tat Parimargitavyam Yasmin Gatana Nivratanti Bhuya tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yata pravritti prashrita purani nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama dvandveva mukta sukha dukkha samjaya gacchantya mudha paramavyaya natad basayate suryo ashashanko napavakaha yad gatvana nirvartante taddama paramam mama mamai vamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manakshastani indriyani prakriti stani karshati shariram yadavapnoti yachapyukramati grihit vaitani samyati vayurgandam ivashayad shotram chakshushparshanam cha rasanam granam evacha adhishtaya manaschayam vishayanupasevate udkramantam stitam vapi munjanam vagunanvitam vimudhanana pashyanti jnana chakshushaha yatanto yoginaschainam pashyantyatmanyavastitam yatanto pyakritatmano nainam pashyanta chetasaha yadaditya gatam tejo jagadbhasayate kilam yachchandramasi yachchagnau tat tejo vidhimamakam gam avishya cha bhutani dharayam yahamojasa pushnami chausadi sarva somo bhutva rasatmakaha ham vaishvanaro bhutva praninam amastitaha pranapana samhayukta pachamnyanam chaturvidam sarvasya chaham vridhisani vishto mataksmitir jnanam apohanam cha vedaisha sarve rahame vedyo vedanta krid veda vedeva chaham dvavima purusha loke shadashakshara evacha sarva sarvani bhutani kutasto shara uchate tama purushastvanya paramatme tudarita yo lokatrayam avishya vipartavya ya ishvara yasmat sharamatitoham aksharadapi chotamaha atosmi loke vedecha pratita purushottama yo mameva masambudho janati purushottamam sasarva vid bhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata iti kuyatamam shastram idam uktam mayanaka etad budva buddhiman syat krita kritasya bharata Om Tat Sat Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Kṛṣṇa Arjuna Sambhade Purushottama Yoga Nama Panchadoshodhyayaha Hari Om. And now with some more kirtan, we'd like to offer first grains to Anasuya.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Yum Yum Bapi. What a good girl.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now we'll do this prognostication, but I already have some predictions to make because of her physiognomy. I said she has very high consciousness, and I can see from her eyes that she's equipoised, very steady. I know she cries probably, right? Kids cry, it's just kind of natural, it's the way they express themselves, but she's very present. I predict that she'll be very intelligent, and also equipoised in life, and a good friend to have, because she'll be confident in herself. And now let's see from our scientific approach. Now, honestly, all we're expecting you to do is just whatever you feel is right. You help yourself to any of these things, and we're going to try to interpret what your movements mean. So here's, on this side, you have Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. In the middle, okay, you don't need much more. Okay, kartals, help yourself. Over here, there's cash, which represents wealth, opulence, used in the service of Krishna, perhaps bringing your acumen and some skill to help spread the Krishna conscious movement. And here is your intellectual approach. Okay, right? And don't scream, because it'll traumatize her for life. Okay, help yourself. Everything there is for you to bring closer to you. Yeah? Okay. Here we have nature over nurture, nurture over nature, we have. And we can see that epigenetics means even if you're inclined in a certain way, no, let her go, let her go. Whatever she wants to do. Otherwise, we don't want to interrupt the experiment. It's a double-blind experiment. She likes devotees. She likes the Bhagavad Gita. She's very confident, as I said. Okay, Gita. There, Gita. Also, the fabric is there. Should be a good dresser, as she is now. And kartals, a good kirtaniya. Oh, kartals. Okay, she'll be all-arounder. Not only will she be expert at organizing things to bring wealth to the Sankirtan movement, she'll also be highly learned in the Shastra and a great kirtaniya. This is my pronouncement. Hare Krishna. You did well, Anasuya. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshmi Nrsimhadev. If you so desire, please bless our dear Anasuya, that she'll always have the association of pure devotees. She'll always rejoice in the festivals throughout the year. She'll love chanting Hare Krishna, reading the Shastra, and may she become a force for good all over the world by her Krishna conscious nature. May she inspire people to take to the path of devotional service as prescribed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, and who wants to see the greatest welfare for Anasuya throughout her whole life, please say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Anasuya, it's been a pleasure. You're an amazing child. Vanchakalptarishya kripasindhabeva patitanam bhavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavi ki jai. And a little more kirtan.